At a family dinner, my grandpa's head was shaved. My parents laughed, until I revealed the truth that made them go silent. Stay with me till the end, because what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My name is Michaela Traynell. I'm 28, a nursing assistant from Mobile, Alabama. I've seen a lot in hospitals, pain, heartbreak, even death, but nothing ever hit me like what I saw at that dinner table in my own home. It was supposed to be a simple family meal, a chance to reconnect after months of barely talking. I had come home thinking maybe, just maybe, things could feel normal again. But that night, I realized nothing about my family had ever been normal. The Traynells are loud, proud, and always pretending to have it together. My father, Darius, runs his landscaping business like a kingdom. My mother, Patrice, plays the perfect church lady who forgives every cruel thing my father says. And my brother Tyrese? He's the golden boy who can do no wrong. Then there's my grandpa, Luther, the only one who ever made me feel loved. He used to call me his bright morning star. But lately, since his mind started slipping, he barely remembers who's who. That night, the table was full of laughter that didn't sound real. My father bragged about new clients. My mother kept pouring wine like her glass had a hole in it. Tyrese scrolled through his phone, smirking at something. Grandpa Luther sat quietly, staring at his food, his hands trembling. I reached over, touched his arm, and smiled. "You okay, Grandpa?" He nodded, slow and tired. Then my father said it. "Man, Pop's looking rough. Needs a fresh cut, don't you think?" He grinned at Tyrese, and before I could even process what was happening, he pulled out a pair of clippers from the drawer. I laughed nervously. "Dad, stop playing." But he didn't stop. The buzzing filled the air as he turned the clippers on and walked behind Grandpa. My mother giggled. Tyrese pulled out his phone to record. "Hold still, old man," Darius said, and just like that, he began shaving Grandpa's head, right there at the dinner table. Bits of gray hair fell into the food. My stomach twisted. "Dad, what are you doing?" I shouted, standing up. But they were all laughing, loud, heartless laughter that made me want to scream. Grandpa didn't fight. He just looked at me with those watery eyes and whispered, "You look just like your mama did back then." Back then? I froze. What did that even mean? The room started spinning. I felt sick watching his tears slide down his cheeks while everyone else carried on like it was a joke. I grabbed my bag and ran out, their laughter echoing behind me like something broken. That night, I sat in my car for a long time, shaking, not knowing why his words, or their laughter, cut me so deep. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner was the moment my whole life started to unravel. Growing up in the Traynell family felt like living inside a storm that never really passed. On the outside, we looked like a good, hardworking Southern family from Mobile, Alabama. My father, Darius, made sure everyone saw us that way. Neat clothes, big smiles, always polite at church. But behind closed doors, the air was tight with fear. He believed respect wasn't given out of love, but forced through silence. He ran his landscaping business the same way he ran our house, with orders, not conversations. If you questioned him, even with your eyes, you paid for it. My mother, Patrice, was the kind of woman who could make any pain sound like a test from God. When Darius yelled, she'd whisper, "He's just tired, baby. Let's pray about it." She hid behind her faith like a curtain, pretending that forgiveness made everything holy. But I could see the way her hands trembled when she picked up broken glass after one of his tantrums. She said she stayed for the family, but deep down I think she stayed because she was too scared to start over. Then there was my brother, Tyrese, my father's pride and joy. Tyrese could charm anyone. Teachers loved him, girls adored him, and my father called him the man of the house before he even turned 16. He learned early how to play the game. Nod when dad spoke, blame others when things went wrong, and laugh when someone else got hurt. He got away with everything. I used to think maybe he'd grow out of it, but instead he grew into it. The only person who ever felt like home to me was my grandpa Luther. Before his mind started fading, he was the heart of our family, a pastor who preached kindness and lived it. When I was little, he'd take me fishing on Saturdays and tell me stories about hope and grace. He taught me how to pray with meaning, not fear. He'd say, "Michaela, the Lord don't live in loud voices or angry hands. He lives in quiet hearts." When my parents were busy fighting or pretending not to fight, Grandpa was the one who tucked me into bed. He showed up at my school plays when no one else did. He was my safe place. But that bond, the way I clung to him, made my father furious. Darius couldn't stand seeing me choose someone else to look up to. I think it bruised his pride. Sometimes, I'd catch him glaring at Grandpa across the dinner table, jaw tight, fists clenched. Once, when I thanked Grandpa for buying me a new backpack, Darius snapped, "You act like that old man's your daddy." The room went silent, and Grandpa just smiled softly, saying, "She's my girl, Darius. Always will be." I never forgot the way my father's eyes darkened that day. It was like he'd made a promise to himself, one he'd keep, no matter who it hurt. When my aunt called that afternoon, her voice was shaky. "Baby, you might want to come see your grandpa," she said. "He's been actin' off lately. Forgettin' faces, talkin' strange." My chest tightened. I hadn't been home in almost 2 years, not since the last fight with my father. But something in her tone told me it was serious. I packed a bag, took a deep breath, and made the long drive back to the house I'd spent my whole life trying to escape. The moment I walked through the front door, the smell hit me, bleach and something sour, like spoiled memories. The walls were freshly scrubbed, but the air still felt dirty. I could hear the TV blaring from the living room and my father's booming voice calling out, "Well, look who finally decided to show up." He stood there in his work jeans and a clean white shirt, pretending to be pleased. My mother, Patrice, came from the kitchen with that familiar fake smile. "Michaela, baby, we didn't expect you so soon," she said, clutching her glass of wine a little too tight. But none of that mattered the second I saw Grandpa Luther sitting by the window. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his eyes cloudy with confusion. When I kneeled in front of him and said, "Hey, Grandpa, it's me," he smiled wide, but then his lips trembled. "Patrice," he whispered. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mother froze, her glass halfway to her lips. My father chuckled awkwardly and said, "He's just mixin' people up again. You know how dementia is." But the way Grandpa said it, soft, almost guilty, stuck in my chest. I forced a smile and hugged him anyway, pretending it didn't hurt. His hands shook as he patted my back, whispering, "You came home, after all this time." That night, we had dinner like old times, except nothing felt real. My father sat at the head of the table, talking about business, acting like he was the king of something grand. My mother laughed at his every word, filling her glass again and again like it was her only escape. Tyrese wasn't there, but his name came up just enough to remind me I'd always been the outsider. I tried to talk to Grandpa, but every time I did, my father cut me off with another story, another forced laugh. The room felt rehearsed, like everyone was acting in a play where the lines didn't quite fit. The clinking of forks and glasses was louder than any conversation. When dinner ended, I helped Grandpa back to his room. The moment I closed his door, the house fell silent. I could hear my parents whispering downstairs, their voices low and tense. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew one thing for sure. They weren't happy I was back. And deep down, I could feel it in my bones. Something about this house wasn't right. Dinner started quietly that night, but I could feel the tension floating in the air like smoke. My father sat at the head of the table, carving the roast with his usual pride. My mother kept her eyes on her plate, sipping wine between fake smiles. Grandpa Luther was sitting beside me, trying to butter a piece of cornbread with shaky hands. Every few minutes, he would drop the knife, and my father would sigh loud enough for everyone to hear. "Man, Pop, you can't even hold a knife steady no more," Darius said, shaking his head. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start, maybe even a fresh cut." I looked up uneasy. "What do you mean?" I asked. He grinned, that kind of grin that made my stomach twist. Without warning, he got up and walked to the kitchen drawer. The sound of metal scraping made me flinch. When he turned around, he was holding electric clippers. "Dad, stop," I said quickly. "You're not serious." "Oh, relax, girl," he said, waving me off. "Just a little cleanup. Ain't like he's gonna notice." Before I could move, he walked behind Grandpa and turned on the clippers. The buzzing filled the room, sharp and ugly. My mother laughed nervously, covering her mouth. "Darius, now don't make a mess at the table," she said, but she didn't stop him. Grandpa sat still, confused at first. When the first lock of his gray hair fell onto his shoulder, his lips started to tremble. My father kept going, laughing harder with each pass. "Look at him now. Clean as a whistle." "Dad, that's enough," I shouted, standing up so fast my chair fell back. But they just laughed louder. My mother tried to take a picture, and Tyrese, who had just come in from the hallway, started recording on his phone. It felt like the walls were closing in. The sound of those clippers drilled into my ears. I wanted to scream, but when I looked at Grandpa, he wasn't fighting. He wasn't even blinking. Tears slid down his cheeks as he looked at me and whispered, You look just like your mama did back then." The words hit me like ice water. I froze. "Back then?" I asked, but he didn't answer. His gaze drifted somewhere far away, somewhere I couldn't reach. My father laughed again, tossing the clippers onto the table. "There we go. Ain't he handsome now?" No one answered. The room smelled like hair and humiliation. My mother refilled her glass, pretending everything was fine. I couldn't stand it anymore. My throat burned, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pushed my chair back, grabbed my bag, and walked out without saying another word. As I stepped outside, I could still hear them laughing. The buzzing sound echoed in my head, mixing with their cruel voices. I stood in the driveway, tears streaming down my face, knowing I had just witnessed something far worse than a joke. That night, the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the old ceiling fan and the sound of crickets outside. Everyone else had gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying what happened at dinner. The laughter, the buzzing clippers, the tears in Grandpa's eyes. I felt sick just thinking about it. I decided to check on him before trying to rest. When I walked into his room, the light from the hallway spilled across his face. He was already half asleep, lying on his side with his hands folded under his cheek like a child. His hair, or what was left of it, was uneven and patchy. Seeing him like that made my chest ache. "Hey, Grandpa," I whispered softly. He stirred a little and smiled faintly. "Michaela, that you?" "Yeah, it's me," I said, pulling the blanket over him. "You need anything before I go?" He shook his head. "Just keep the light low. Too bright hurts my eyes." I nodded and turned toward the nightstand to dim the lamp. That's when I saw it, his old Bible lying open near the edge. It looked worn out, the pages yellow and crumpled from years of use. A small piece of paper was sticking out from between the pages like a forgotten bookmark. At first, I thought it was just a note or a church pamphlet, but something about the edges, brown, fragile, made me curious. I hesitated. I knew it wasn't right to go through his things, but my hands moved on their own. I pulled the paper out carefully and unfolded it. The creases were deep, and the ink had faded in some places, but the words were still clear enough to read. It was a birth certificate. My birth certificate. I blinked a few times, confused. Why would Grandpa have that? But as my eyes moved down the page, my stomach dropped. Under child's name, it said Michaela Traynell. That part was normal. Under mother, it read Patrice Traynell. That was my mom. But when I looked at the line for father, my heart stopped. It didn't say Darius. It said Luther Traynell. I froze. My fingers started to shake. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, a mix-up, an old form, anything else. But as I stared at it longer, the truth started sinking in. My grandfather wasn't my grandfather. He was my father. I looked over at him, sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling with each breath. My mind couldn't keep up with my heart. All those years he'd looked at me with a kind of sadness I couldn't explain, the way he always called me his girl. Suddenly, it all made a painful kind of sense. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to wake him, to ask why, to demand answers, but my voice wouldn't come out. I just stood there, clutching the paper against my chest, feeling my whole world tilt. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavy. I slipped the paper back into the Bible, kissed his forehead, and left the room quietly. As I closed the door behind me, I knew nothing in that house, or in my life, would ever be the same again. The next morning, I couldn't look at anyone. My stomach was tight, my mind spinning from what I had found in that Bible. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words on that old paper. Luther Traynell listed as my father. My hands were still shaking when I walked into the kitchen. The smell of coffee and bleach mixed in the air, sour and sharp. My mother was at the sink, washing dishes like she always did when she didn't want to talk. "Mom," I said, my voice small at first. She didn't turn around. I took a breath. I found something in Grandpa's Bible that made her stop. Her hands froze mid-rinse, and a plate slipped, hitting the bottom of the sink with a dull thud. She didn't ask what I found. She just stood there, shoulders stiff, water still running. "Why does my birth certificate say Luther is my father?" I asked louder now. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned off the faucet, grabbed a towel, and pressed it against her face. Her whole body trembled. "Michaela," she whispered, "you shouldn't have found that." I felt heat rise in my chest. "So it's true." When she finally looked at me, her eyes were red and swollen. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "It's true." The air felt like it disappeared. "How?" Why would you? She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was 16, baby. 16. I didn't understand what was happening. Your granddaddy, he wasn't the man you think he was back then. He hurt me. Her voice cracked into pieces. They said if anyone found out, it would destroy the family. So when Darius came along, my daddy begged him to marry me and raise you as his own. They told me it was God's way of giving me a second chance. I stepped back, dizzy. So you just went along with it? You let me grow up calling him Grandpa. She nodded weakly. We had to. Nobody could ever know. We told everyone you were our daughter because if the church or the neighbors found out, we'd lose everything. Your father, Darius, he always hated Luther for what happened. That's why he treated him like that. Last night, shaving his head. That was his way of getting back at him. I covered my mouth, trying not to scream. So that dinner was a punishment. She sobbed harder. He called it payback for the family sin. I couldn't take it anymore. The kitchen felt like it was closing in on me. Every prayer we'd ever said together, every Sunday sermon, every fake smile in those family portraits, it all felt like poison now. I was just a child, I whispered, my voice trembling. And you both lied to me my entire life. She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped away. Michaela, please. No, I said, tears blurring my vision. Don't call me that. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. I walked out before she could say another word, the sound of her crying echoing behind me like a confession I never asked for. Before I could make it out the back door, I heard the floorboards creak behind me. My father's voice came low and sharp, the kind of tone that used to make me freeze when I was little. What's all this noise about, huh? He asked. You two sound like a couple of fools. I turned around slowly. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes burning. He must have heard everything. My mother covered her face with her hands, whispering, Darius, please. He ignored her. His eyes locked on me. So, you finally found out, huh? Took you long enough. I swallowed hard. You knew? He smirked. Of course I knew. I've known since before you were born. That old man ruined my life, and yours too. You should be thanking me for stepping in when nobody else would. His words made my skin crawl. Thanking you? I said, my voice shaking. You let me grow up thinking you were my father. You let me love him like a grandfather when he... I stopped myself, the words catching in my throat. He stepped closer, his voice rising. What did you want me to do, huh? Let the whole world know my wife had a baby by her own daddy? Let folks at church whisper behind our backs forever? Nah. I did what had to be done. I married your mother, raised you like my own, and carried that shame for years while he sat there acting holy. Patrice sobbed, collapsing into a chair. Darius, please don't. He spun toward her. Don't what? Tell the truth? You started this mess when you brought her into this world. Stop it, I shouted, but my voice sounded small compared to his anger. He turned back to me, his expression twisted with bitterness. You think you're the only one who's been lied to? I had to live every day looking at you. His mistake, sitting at my table calling me dad. Do you know what that felt like? I felt my knees go weak. I'm not a mistake, I whispered. He laughed cold and hollow. You were never supposed to exist, Michaela. You were just a reminder. Patrice was crying so hard she could barely speak. I'm sorry, she kept repeating, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry, baby. We thought we were protecting you. But her words didn't comfort me, they broke me. Protecting me? They had destroyed me with their silence. They'd let me build my life on a lie so deep that even love felt dirty now. I looked at both of them, the two people who were supposed to guide me, and all I saw were strangers. Every Sunday prayer, every birthday candle, every picture on the wall, it all felt like part of their cover-up. I wiped my face and stood tall, my heart pounding. You all buried the truth once, I said quietly. But I won't let you bury it again. My father opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. I walked out, letting the screen door slam behind me, vowing that from this moment on, their lies would end, and my truth would begin. After everything that had come out, the house felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of it. My mother sat slumped at the table, whispering prayers under her breath. My father paced across the kitchen, his anger boiling just beneath the surface. But me, I was calm. Too calm. I wiped my face, stood up straight, and spoke in a voice that even surprised me. We can talk tomorrow, I said quietly. All of us. Over dinner. Maybe we can work through this. Darius turned, squinting at me. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, meeting his eyes, We can settle everything properly. No more shouting. Just the truth. One last family dinner. For a second, I thought he'd see through it, but then his jaw relaxed. He gave a smug laugh and said, "Fine by me. About time we put this whole mess to rest." "Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, I said. "I'll cook." Patrice looked up with tear-stained eyes. "Michaela, please don't." "I said tomorrow," I repeated, steady as stone. Then I walked out before either of them could say another word. That night, I barely slept. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. By sunrise, I was at the print shop in town, making copies of every piece of evidence I had. The birth certificate, the note I'd written down after my mother's confession, and the recording I'd secretly made when she said it out loud. I slid everything neatly into a folder and tucked it in my purse. The next afternoon, I started cooking early. Luther loved gumbo, shrimp, sausage, and okra, seasoned just the way he taught me when I was a little girl. As the pot simmered, the smell filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. But this time, it wasn't comfort I felt, it was resolve. By 5, the table was set, candles flickering, silverware shining, bowls waiting. The house looked almost peaceful. You'd never guess the kind of truth waiting to explode inside those walls. At 6 sharp, Darius came down the hall, smelling like aftershave and arrogance. "Well, this looks nice," he said, sitting at the head of the table like nothing had happened. Patrice followed quietly, her eyes swollen, her hands shaking. I ladled gumbo into their bowls, forcing a smile. "I figured we all needed a proper meal," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. For a moment, everything looked almost normal. The 3 of us sitting together, steam rising from the food, the faint sound of gospel music playing on the radio. Darius laughed, told a joke about one of his clients, and my mother gave a small, hollow laugh in return. But I wasn't laughing out of fear anymore. I reached down to touch my purse under the table, feeling the folder inside. The truth, quiet and ready. They thought this was just another family dinner. They didn't realize it would be their last one where the lies stayed buried. So I smiled, just like they used to, calm and sweet. But this time, I was the one in control. The gumbo was perfect, the candles soft and steady. Everything looked peaceful, but my heart was pounding like a drum. I watched Darius slurp from his spoon, satisfied and smug. Patrice sat with her head low, pretending to eat, her hands trembling. And Luther, sweet Luther, smiled faintly at me, unaware that this dinner was about to change everything. Halfway through the meal, I set my spoon down. "I have something to say," I said quietly. Darius looked up, annoyed. "What now, Michaela? You already got your drama out of the way yesterday." I reached into my purse, my fingers steady. I pulled out the folded papers and laid them carefully in the center of the table. "This," I said, my voice clear, "is who I am. And this is what you've done." Patrice froze. Darius frowned, confused for a second, until his eyes caught the words on the birth certificate. "Under father," it said Luther Traynell. Patrice let out a sharp sob, covering her face. Darius slammed his fist on the table. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "Where did you get that?" "From Luther's Bible," I said. "And I have your confession recorded, Mom. Every word." Patrice started to cry harder, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't mean for it to. I was young, Michaela, I didn't know." "Stop lying." Darius roared, his voice echoing off the walls. "You're going to destroy this family over some old man's dementia?" Before I could speak, Luther stirred. His fork clattered onto the plate. His voice, soft but firm, cut through the shouting. "She's my child." Everything stopped. Even Darius went silent. Patrice's sobs turned into wails. Darius's face twisted red with rage. "You sick old man," he shouted, flipping his chair back. "You ruined everything. You ruined me." Luther's hands trembled as he looked at me, tears in his cloudy eyes. "I loved you every day of your life, baby girl," he whispered. Darius lunged toward him, but I stepped in front. My phone was already recording. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Keep talking. The police will love this." He froze. His eyes darted to the phone, then to the papers spread out on the table. The power in the room shifted, just like that. The man who had ruled through fear was suddenly small, a desperate bully trapped in his own lies. "You can't prove anything," he hissed. "I already did," I said. "The birth certificate, Mom's confession, your threats. It's all going to the authorities. And I'm reporting you for elder abuse. You think I didn't notice the bruises on Luther's arms? The missing money? I saw it all." Patrice cried harder. Darius looked ready to explode, but he didn't move. I pressed stop on the recording and slipped the phone back into my purse. The silence was heavy, thick with truth and fear. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one afraid. They were. Weeks passed like slow-moving waves against the shore. The storm had finally broken, and what was left behind was quiet, a kind of silence that wasn't empty, but healing. Luther now lived with me in my small apartment near the bay. The place wasn't much, 2 rooms, cracked tiles in the kitchen, and a window that faced the water, but it felt like home in a way that house never did. Every morning, Luther sat by that window, humming old hymns while the light danced on his face. His memory still slipped sometimes, but there was peace in his eyes. The trembling fear he used to carry was gone. When I'd bring him his tea, he'd smile faintly and say, "The Lord sure knew what he was doing when he gave me you." I'd just squeeze his hand and whisper, "I'm the lucky one, Daddy." The investigation moved quickly after that night. The recordings, the documents, everything I turned in, it all painted a picture too clear to ignore. Darius tried to deny it, shouting about forged papers and family conspiracies, but the truth caught up with him fast. His clients pulled away first. Then the news spread through the neighborhood. Within a month, his landscaping business folded. Trucks repossessed, contracts canceled, gone, just like that. I didn't go to the hearing when he faced the charges for elder abuse. I didn't need to. For once, I didn't have to watch him to know justice was being done. Patrice left town quietly, packed her things, and moved in with her sister somewhere up north. She called once, her voice soft and broken, asking if I could ever forgive her. I didn't know what to say. Part of me pitied her. Another part couldn't forget how she stood silent all those years while pretending faith could wash away what she'd done. So I told her, "I hope you find peace," and ended the call. I haven't heard from her since. Tyrese stayed distant. No calls. No texts. Last I heard, he'd moved to Atlanta chasing some job that didn't exist. Maybe guilt drove him, maybe shame. I didn't care to ask. For once, their lives didn't define mine. One breezy Sunday, I took Luther for a drive. We stopped by the cemetery on the hill, the one where my grandmother was buried. There, under an old oak, was a stone with my name carved faintly from years ago. The one they almost used when I was born, before they changed everything to keep their secret. I knelt beside it, brushed the dirt away, and whispered, "No more lies." The wind picked up, soft and warm, carrying Luther's humming in the background. It wasn't a happy ending, not the kind you see in stories. Too much had been lost for that. But it was real. It was mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Do you think Michaela made the right choice by walking away from her family and choosing peace? Or should she have tried to rebuild what was broken? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you think. And if stories like this touch your heart, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next one.